Thank you all for being here today. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for 4 seasons now, but we have a really great slate of guests lined up this year, and I think Richard is the perfect person to kick us off. So we are going to just jump on in, and we're going to start where we always do. People who've been to Southern Jewish Voices before will know we always move sort of chronologically, though we're probably going to take little winding paths along the way. But Richard is an interesting guest because he has, as you're going to learn, had an amazing career practicing law here in Alabama. He also is from here, from Birmingham. And so we're going to do our best in 45 minutes to really let you know Richard both as a professional and a person. So I would love to start with learning just a little bit about your background and family. You grew up here in Birmingham, as I just shared. You had one living grandparent here in Birmingham when you were growing up, your grandfather Meyer. Tell us a little bit about him and about your parents, just to start us off.
Yeah, so it's an honor to be here, and it's great to see many familiar faces. And I'm sure they're questioning, why is this guy sitting here? But I am, and I'm glad to be here. Like many of us. My families came from Lithuania in the early 1900s, and Meyer was the only grandparent I knew. My mother's father, he lived a block from Temple Bethel. He walked there every Shabbos. He spoke 99% Yiddish. I was kind of one of his favorites, but I was rambunctious and definitely gave him and my family a very difficult time, as some of my friends know well. But Meyer was a good person, and he separated from his brother, Sam, when they escaped from the Russian army. Sam Solomon and Meyer Slaughter, my grandfather, didn't see each other for 51 years, and then they reunited in Birmingham, which was quite amazing. The Birmingham News Post-Herald did a story about it. And my father owned a auto parts store and took Sam down there one day on a Sunday when he was visiting here from South Africa. And my father, who had no color line, everybody was a good person, and my father embraced people and loved people and was a touchy person, and he would shake his customers' hands and greet them with a lot of love and compassion. And it really offended Sam Solomon because he was here during the midst of apartheid, and he just couldn't understand it. So he got pretty upset about it. But my father, was my father, and he continued to greet his customers, and we moved on. But that should tell you a little bit about what was going on in the late 60s and early 70s, still here in the South and, of course, in South Africa.
Yeah, and I guess maybe just to paint the picture a little bit, what are some words that you would use to describe Birmingham in that era? Because you're kind of painting that contrast with South Africa.
Well, it certainly wasn't the comeback town that David Scher has coined and done such an extraordinary job of promoting Birmingham and seeing all the advantages we now have that we didn't have then. It was very polarized. We lived on Richmar Drive ultimately, initially on Montevallo Road, and I lived in a mixed neighborhood, so among both Jewish and Gentiles. Richmar, we had one Jewish family, one non-Jewish family only that lived on Richmar Drive. Everybody else was Jewish, and everybody knew everyone. Again, it was polarized. Civil rights was something that, at least for my family, and I think probably my friends, was hidden from us. We were shielded. It was something that we didn't really understand. We might see glimpses of it on the news, but it was never discussed, at least in my family. But civil rights was a very big deal. I personally remember going to see George Wallace speak in Talladega and standing on the hood of a car and watching him, being very mesmerized as to how extraordinary of a speaker he was until the mesmerization left, and I realized that what he was doing was spewing hate. He might not have had hate because he was political, and all he cared about was not losing again, as he had lost before to someone more liberal. But ultimately, again, civil rights was the cornerstone of what was going on here, and it was very divisive, and Alabama triggered civil rights through the church bombings that my good friend Doug Jones prosecuted, and Scottsboro, where I spent a lot of time now, and I actually helped get the exonerations of the Scottsboro boys posthumously over the last 4 or 5 years, was also a huge trigger for the civil rights movement, as were other major events as well.
Well, there are definitely some threads we're going to pick back up there, but I want to ask one more question about your father's business, because you shared with me that along with sparking, I think, some of these initial ideas about civil rights that clearly carried through your career, there was also an incident that prompted some interest for you, at least in just an initial spark in the legal system. Tell me about the blue laws and how that all came into play.
Yeah, we
with
did
you.
have the blue laws here. I don't know if we still have them or not in other places. The blue laws were prohibitions against selling alcohol and working on Sundays because we're in the Bible Belt. And there was an exception for that, and that is if it was a necessity or a private club. A necessity would be a grocery store, for example. Well, my dad thought auto parts was an exception, and that's what he did. So most of his clients were minorities. They couldn't get there often until Sunday morning. So my dad was open until noon, and someone complained about that. And while I was there, the sheriff's officers, deputies came in, and in front of customers and me, as his 16, 15, 17-year-old son, handcuffed him and took him to jail for violating the blue laws. Ultimately, he went to court, and he represented himself. He didn't have the money for a lawyer, and of course they threw it out. But yeah, that made an impression on me, because if someone's falsely accused or wrongfully accused of something and humiliated for doing what they thought was right, that makes an impression on a young kid, and it did on me, and it certainly influenced me, among other things, to become a criminal defense lawyer.
Very interesting, and we're going to get more into that as well when we get to your journey at UA. But 2 other sort of childhood questions I want to ask you. You know, one, I ask this of all of our guests, which is, what is the role that Judaism played in your life and your family's life? You know, you shared that your grandfather was very connected to Temple Bethel. You also shared with me in our initial interview that you got confirmed kind of kicking and screaming at Temple Bethel. So just tell me a little bit about like what Judaism meant to you, to your family. Where was it for you?
Well, we were sort of debating this group back there recently about who had to mouth the words during confirmation because we couldn't sing, and I was one of the 2. And it's a debate about who was the second person, and we haven't concluded, but we know I was one of those people that couldn't carry the tune. But yeah, confirmation was something that I have mixed feelings about, because I was probably the only Jewish person besides Stuart that played high school basketball, and my mother made me miss the sophomore year. We went to Shades Valley then to go to confirmation, and it certainly hampered my ability to be a basketball player. I could have been a lot better, although I was still plenty good enough. But confirmation was, I have a mixed feeling about that. My daughter, who is Orthodox Jewish, Chabad, probably the only disagreement Sandra, her mom, and I ever had, and Barry, was whether Lana would go to confirmation, because my position was Lana could teach it. And ultimately, I prevailed on that, and glad I did, because Lana was living in Indian Springs and didn't need to spend a half a day coming to confirmation. I'm not denigrating confirmation. I'm just saying that that's my experience of it.
And beyond confirmation, what about like more broadly, like how was Judaism practiced in your home? I think you shared with me your mother was maybe the more religious one, or
Yes.
more I don't know if that's the word you would use, but that's
Yeah,
the one.
Mom followed in the footsteps of my grandfather and went to Temple Bethel every single Saturday. She lived to nearly 100. Some say 100 because she might have fudged her age a year. But she never missed, and Diane Slaughter, married to my first cousin Howard, would take her there until she could no longer go. So my mother went to Temple Bethel, I guess, 95 years.
Wow, that's really amazing. And that's really lovely that Diane would take her there too. I don't think Diane's not here, I don't think, but we'll have to get her that clip. One more sort of childhood question. I always like to tie in something with the JCC when we have that connection, because of course we're here in the JCC. And I thought it was neat that you shared with me that you had these memories of Coach Ralph, I think it was, picking you up and taking you to the downtown location before it was here. I mean, I guess I would love to hear just what you remember of that location and what the role of the JCC was for you in your life.
The JCC downtown, as I recall it, was not far from the 16th Street Baptist Church, and we were taken every often after school there, and it was an old building, and but it was adequate. I have vivid memories of being there, of the stage up there where the weights were, and the swimming pool where all the men swam without any clothes, and all that stuff. But that was an experience I won't ever forget. Coach Ralph Thomas then transitioned here, where we are now, after this was built. And then this became my home and many of my friends' homes away from home, because after work, this is where I would land. And I spent almost every single day after work here, running, playing basketball, lifting weights, playing racquetball, and getting to know the stalwarts of the community that were here.
Wow, that's really, and I always enjoy hearing about like what the J has meant to people, so thank you for sharing that. I want to kind of move to the next part of your life, which is when you go to University of Alabama. And you kind of described yourself to me, which I think could be surprising to some people who know you for your career, as maybe not the most engaged student, at least to start. But
I don't think that would surprise that many people.
Okay, well, maybe I didn't know you as well as all these people. I just had your long list of accomplishments in front of me.
Well, you see sort of a tree and you don't see the acorn.
Yeah. But tell me, like, what was the turning point for you where you become interested in law and kind of start on this path?
I'm not sure I read a book, and that's unfortunate, before college. But my mother gave me a choice: go work for your dad at the auto parts store, or go to college. So there I went. And University of Alabama, was in a fraternity, and I was my typical rambunctious, wild, irreverent self, and very immature and quite selfish, to be honest with you. And quite self-centered. However, I did meet someone that, outstanding person, Jewish. His name was Mark Mandel, and Mark's still practicing law. He's one of the best trial lawyers in the country today. And Mark was my roommate, and he ran for SGA, ultimately was the vice president, and influenced me to read. And I began reading all kinds of books, by Bobby Seale and you name it, and learning about civil rights, learning about all of the transgressions in the South and other places throughout our country. And I ran for offices and got to be a little bit creative. You couldn't spend more than $50 to run for an office, but we went out and got free car hoods, and we put the car hoods across the campus at the University of Alabama. And I did win handedly, and became a SGA congressman, more to speak, and then a senator, and ultimately was on the honor court there. And from there, I launched into law school. So it's interesting. You can be influenced by one teacher, one parent, one close friend, somebody that just takes you under their wing, like Carl Friedman took so many of us under their wings. And Carl Friedman came to my rescue and saved my life literally on a number of occasions that we won't talk about. But the point is that Mark was that person for me that changed everything. And after Mark, it was Bill Baxley.
And so that's a perfect transition. Tell me about how you met Bill Baxley and how you went to go work for him, because this is really, at least from what I can see, the sort of big stepping stone into your career.
Well, when I was in law school, there were 175 people in my class, and there was only one person in that class that wanted to be a criminal lawyer or any lawyer. Like I see these wonderful, great lawyers right in front of me that are so good, but everybody wanted to be like them. And they're very successful, and they're terrific lawyers, both of them. But only one person in my class wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer, and that was me. So that was my mission. That's what I wanted to do. I became a prosecutor first. I took a year off between law school and college, worked for my dad, and we only had 3 channels then. And one of them was the Alabama Public TV. And I watched that TV and happened to see the youngest attorney general in the country speaking. And I was mesmerized, just like I was with George Wallace, only I happened to agree with everything he said. He was progressive, he was brilliant, he was compassionate. So I wrote him a letter, a handwritten letter, and I didn't expect this person to respond to me, but he did. He wrote me a handwritten letter back. I corresponded with Bill Baxley over the next 3 years. My last year in law school, I wrote him another letter, and I said, I want to come work for you. And he said, all right, come down to Montgomery, I'll interview you and I'll hire you. And he did. And that was a pretty major, and I'm still close with Bill today and still stay in very close connection with Bill, who I think is heroic, amazing human being.
I actually just heard him speak on Monday at the 16th Street Baptist Church commemoration, and yeah, he was amazing.
He's amazing, and I had the honor of presenting with Bill to white-collar lawyers in Alabama 3 or 4 weeks ago, and just he and I, and we had a wonderful exchange, and it was a memorable experience. I can't tell you what he means to me.
Well, let me ask you just sort of 2 more questions about that. One that I just picked up on, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm curious, because you said you were the only person in your class who was interested in criminal defense, like
in criminal law at all.
Criminal law at all. So I guess my question would be, why were you interested in criminal law, and why were other people not interested in criminal law?
It's a great question. Alabama is a school, and what's interesting, and very few people know this, that Alabama then, anybody could get in it practically. Not now. It's one of the top 16 law schools in the country. You've got to have a score that's off the charts on the LSAT. You probably need a 4.0 to get in now, even if you're from Alabama. But back then, estates, corporate, taxes, property, this was, and it's still the emphasis at the University of Alabama Law School. I'm on the board there and still involved very much with University of Alabama Law School. But they really upset me recently because they took away evidence as one of the required courses, which is absurd. But I'm just one person. The point is that Alabama just did not, but they did emphasize moot court. And moot court is where you compete against other students. And although I was far from an academic, I did happen to do quite well. I was number 1 in my class in moot court by far. And that launched me into a desire to be a trial lawyer.
Okay. And before I ask you about sort of what you do after working with Bill Baxley, I'm curious if there's sort of like one key lesson or takeaway from that time that you spent working in the Attorney General's office, something that kind of shaped you moving forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was able to watch what Bill Baxley did was he took an office of 12 or 13 lawyers, assistant attorney generals, and he built it into 50 or 60, and he changed the course of the entire concept of what the attorney general does in the state of Alabama, and he transformed it. So I was able to watch Bill become a leader, but also watched Bill hit extraordinary courage. I'm not sure, I don't want to say anything that's being recorded, but this is public, that when the Ku Klux Klan wrote him a letter and threatened him, he sent the letter back, everybody knows this probably, with 3 words on it in handwrite, "Kiss my ass." And Bill is fearless. He was then and he is now. And watching and being with someone that is both courageous and compassionate, that immeasurably influenced me because it gave me permission to be me as opposed to perform the way I did in undergraduate school and elementary school and high school, where I would get kicked out of class often enough.
But even though this is a very influential moment for you, you do decide to step away and start your own practice. So I would love to hear about how you make that decision, what happens next, and how you build your practice really from the ground up.
Yeah, one of the hardest decisions I ever made was leaving Bill Baxley, the Attorney General's office, but you had to wait in line. He had so many phenomenal lawyers, incredible lawyers, that you had to wait in line to get in the courtroom, and I just wanted to be in the courtroom. That's all I cared about. So I went to the district attorney's office in Tuscaloosa. The quick story about that is it's political, and my boss then had fired everybody in the office because it's politics, and nobody knew anything, including him, about criminal law, but I did, because I left the Attorney General's office. So he put me in a leadership position and gave me the cases to prosecute and try that nobody wanted to do, because as a DA in a small place, you don't want to lose. So he gave them all to me, and that obviously shaped me because I began to investigate those cases from the ground up to make sure we wouldn't lose them. My last case was prosecuting a guy. The case was 8 or 10 years, state of Alabama versus Bobby Thigpen, and he had 13 DUIs and ran over a 15-year-old on a bike, and nobody cared. Black kid. So I, along with one of my colleagues, went out to the family. I kept this kid's picture in my wallet for 2 years. And I said, before I leave, I'm going to convict this guy, because nobody wanted to. So I went over and visited the family, and they lived in a little shack, and they had no heat. So I went out and bought them a heater, but it was kind of a waste because they couldn't afford the electricity to heat their home. And they never expected the case to go to trial, but it did. And my parents drove down from Birmingham to watch that trial. The air conditioning went out. It was in June of 1978, and we were sweating bullets, but we did try Bobby Lee Thigpen, and we did convict Bobby Lee Thigpen of murder in the 2nd degree, which that was the first murder conviction ever in the state of Alabama for DUI homicide. And he went to prison. And so, I'm quite proud of that. And the law firm that I tried it against then took me in the back and offered me a job. But I had already committed to come to Birmingham. And when I came to Birmingham, I had no clients. I was not interested in any old case. All I cared about was criminal cases, but how do you do that when nobody knows you? Unfortunately, we have a sickening society of violence. We saw that 2 days ago. We see it every day here. We do have a comeback town, and I'm proud of it, and it's a wonderful place to live, but we're still even though violence is going down some, it's still very scary. I live on the south side. I walked to dinner last night and walked back, and I was a little careful. It was about 8:30, 9 o'clock. Violence has taken over our society, and it's very sad. People think criminal lawyers like violence. I just as soon never have another criminal case again. I'd love that, but that's not the way things are. So, that's my best answer to that.
So how did you build up the practice, though? You come here with no clients.
0 clients, and people would come to me and feel sorry for me and offer me certain cases, but I didn't want them. But I guess where I was leading to is now it's normalized to do certain things in politics, regardless of what side you're on. It's also normalized now to read the paper or watch TV that some violent act occurred. It's terrible, but it wasn't then. So if you had a murder case, it was on TV and it was on the newspaper and it was covered. It was a big deal. The courthouses were packed. I had a lot of those because I was appointed. I worked for $10 an hour. I made $500 per case, but I put my own money into the cases because I didn't want to lose. So it was worth it for me to hire experts and investigators and do whatever it took for my clients. And because I didn't want to lose for them, I also didn't want to lose for me. And as a result, however, the first summer I tried 3 murder cases and I lost all 3. But that wasn't because I didn't do a good job. It was because these happened to be very difficult cases, and they ended up going to prison, as they should have. But the point is, I was out there and building a reputation and a name for myself because just because I lost 3 murder cases that summer, I also won a ton of cases, and the newspapers picked it up. In fact, one particular case, speaking of being Jewish, because there were only 2 Jewish criminal lawyers then in the state, in the thing. But one particular case, a kid, a black kid, he was 15, and he went to A.G. Gaston's to a party. And while he was at A.G. Gaston's, in the back seat, he couldn't drive. There was a gun in the back seat. They were crashing the party, A.G. Gaston's. As they were leaving the party, he grabbed a gun because some kid at the party threw a bottle at the car, put his left arm out of the car, shot in the air, killed a young kid. Horrible case, and it was just everybody wanted his head, as they should have. But I was appointed to handle the case. We tried the case, and the jury found him innocent, other than guilty of what's called criminal negligent homicide. So he did 12 months in jail, which was a huge win. Our rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, Rabbi Grappin, was so upset, he formed a committee to investigate why this tragedy occurred. This guy was let off, and who this Richard Jaffe guy is. And there was actually a committee formed to investigate that. But when you handle those types of cases and you win, or you do your best for your client and you're all over the press, you can build a practice.
It's really interesting because I feel like you're also highlighting just how different the way that we consume or don't consume news is now. So that's interesting to think about. You also mentioned that you were one of only 2 criminal defense lawyers in the state, I think you just said?
In this county, I'm sorry.
In the county.
In the city.
Okay, in the county, in the city. But, I mean, that's still, I guess I'm curious what it was like specifically then to be a Jewish criminal defense lawyer in that moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure who in this room remembers Judge Jack Montgomery. He had a television show on Channel 6. He was... Anybody that's seen And Justice for All with Al Pacino, there was a crazy judge that was just out of his mind. And he was sitting on the ledge eating the peanuts and all that stuff. Judge Montgomery was exactly that. He was, except that Judge Montgomery was evil, I'm sorry to say, and corrupt. And it just so happened that he couldn't stand Jews. and he would constantly berate me and the other Jewish lawyer at my expense, and it was humiliating, but it is what it is, or was what it was. But I had to deal with Judge Montgomery every day, and it wasn't a lot of fun. But I never backed down. He pulled a gun on me actually in court, and that's in my book, and I brought 2 to give away in case anybody's interested. But yeah, he pulled a gun on me, and they grabbed him, and the bailiffs grabbed me, and I remember the bailiff coming behind me and going, "Not today, Richard, not today. Please don't do anything else. He's going to shoot you." And I went, "Well, I'm not backing down." And they took him and they gave him a Coke, came back out. We had the preliminary hearing, and he actually threw the case out because he had a good side to him too. But the point is, I represented a guy that it was very clear to me that this guy had bribed Judge Montgomery. And that was clear to me. I was sure of it. But there's a thing called the attorney-client privilege that us lawyers know. And you can't disclose what you think or even what you're told unless it involves something in the future. But you can't do that because it encourages people, if you keep secrets, to tell you the truth, and that's important for our system. Well, I was sure that he had bribed the judge through a bail bondsman. So ultimately, he finally admitted it to me. And I always had a tape recorder on me because I tape recorded preliminary hearings. And I was able to catch the bail bondsman on tape twice, asking me for, why is my client not paying him $5,000? And I went, "Warren, why would he pay you $5,000 when 10% what a bail bondsman charge is $500? I'm not sure where you're coming from." I went to the FBI, and Doug Jones was then a U.S. attorney, and Doug went with me, and I went to the FBI. They wired my client up. My client then was able to catch the bail bondsman and ultimately Judge Montgomery. In this robbery scheme, Judge Montgomery and the bail bondsman were prosecuted. Judge Montgomery allegedly shot himself. I don't believe it, but the point is that he died, but Valentine's Day, right before his trial, and the bail bondsman went to prison, and then the bail bondsman was going to go to prison, and he was shot. And then it turned out that the person that they said shot him, which was his girlfriend, then, who, Green Acres, everybody know about it? That's their family, and they hired Doug Jones to represent her. Doug associated me, so we represented her and went to trial 3 different times, and she did not shoot Warren. Warren was shot, in my opinion, by the same people that shot Montgomery, and ultimately she was exonerated.
Wow. Well, so if you cannot tell, he's got some great stories of different cases that he's been involved in over the years. And I would encourage everybody to check out Richard's book. As he mentioned, we have 2 copies here. I don't think we have any system for deciding who gets them, so it might be a first come, first serve, but we can definitely, I'm sure, obtain more.
Yeah, you can't buy it because it's sold out. So if people want them, whoever you want to get them to.
Sounds good. But I do want to ask you about, well, so it's interesting. After we talked, and I shared this with you, I tried several different iterations of figuring out which cases to ask you about. But I think we would be here all day if I asked you about specific cases. So I'm going to ask you a few broader questions instead. And one is that I want to ask you, because this is something that you've had quite a bit of experience with, is what it has been like to work with people who are facing death row here in Alabama.
Yeah, I have represented more people, perhaps in the country, but certainly in the state, that have faced the death penalty than anyone else. It's not mainly what I do now. I mainly do white collar stuff, but I still do some of that. And it's daunting. And what I've learned about representing these people many of which were guilty, are guilty, many of which are in prison. And none of my clients have been executed, so I've been fortunate. But what I've learned is you hear every day, I hear, well, people just don't change. People are just the way they are. And that's just not true. And the reason I know that's not true is because I have in major ways, because change comes from the inside. But I've also learned and seen and watched people that have done heinous acts, horrifically inexcusable, horrific, vile acts. And I have watched them over decades basically transform, and it could without a motivation, knowing they're not getting out. And I've watched some of these people become extraordinarily compassionate and caring individuals that have taken responsibility. I've watched others forgive them for what they've done, and I've watched them forgive themselves. So people can change, and they do change. We have prisons in Norway and Sweden and Germany that are completely different from those in the US. There, the recidivism rate, people that return to prison, is very low. And they actually house murderers in the same places where they house thieves and people full of drugs. And they have a rehabilitation system. We have the most violent prisons in the country, in this state, and in our country. The United States has 5% of the population, and we house 25% of those in the world that are incarcerated. We need to do something with our criminal justice system, and unfortunately, Judge Teresa Pulliam, who was one of the most amazing people I've ever known, was very close with her, just received a handwritten note from her 3 days ago, and she died suddenly. She was on the forefront of reviving our parole system, and it's a sad day. Just like Neil Young said, why do the good die young? But yeah, we have a lot of work to do in our criminal justice system. And the sad fact is that everybody that's charged isn't guilty, but most people think that everybody's that's charged is guilty, but it's not true.
I don't know that we have time to go too deep into this one, but I'm curious if you could just let people know where they can hear more about it, because I know that you've been involved in the, just to hear more about the TaForest Johnson case. We probably don't have time to go deep into the details, but I know that's something you're involved in that's ongoing. Where could people learn more about that case?
Yeah, the TaForest Johnson case, what do we have, 5 minutes? Yeah, TaForest Johnson case is a big case nationally. It's in my book. TaForest Johnson has been on death row for, I don't know, if it's 27 years, I haven't done the math. And there's probably no more innocent person on death row or in jail or anywhere than TaForest Johnson. TaForest Johnson and his friend, Ardregas Ford, their families came to me to represent both of them for some silly possession of marijuana case that's probably not even illegal today. And while representing both of them in that, Deputy Hardy, which was then Crown Sterling Suites, is now the Embassy Suites, he was shot and killed. Unfortunately, we won't get into the details, you're right, but Ardregas Ford and TaForest Johnson were falsely accused of doing the killing when it was impossible for them to have done it. And TaForest Johnson ended up with appointed attorneys and that didn't really seem to care. I represented, my law firm and me, Ardregas Ford. We went to trial 2 or 3 times, twice. He was acquitted in 45 minutes the second time. Emory Anthony helped me in that second trial. TaForest Johnson didn't have that benefit of caring counsel, and he's on death row when the only witness that could put him anywhere is dead now, had given 25 inconsistent, perjured statements, and there is no evidence in any form or fashion. In fact, Ardragas and Tafaris had 13 alibi witnesses that were solid witnesses that they couldn't have done it. So that's what's going on. Bill Baxley called me a year ago because I went to Danny Carr personally and said, look, I can't help Tafaris, so I sent him to Atlanta, to the Southern Center for Human Rights. They're representing him now. But I talked the Southern Center into getting involved into that, and they are. And I talked Danny Carr into looking at the case. And I spent a year with Danny, and Danny now says he's innocent and is trying to free him. And then Bill Baxley called me about 6 months ago and said his son wants him to look at the case, but he knows I'm involved and he wants to hear it from me. Is he innocent? Because Bill Baxley is a big death penalty proponent. He wrote the death penalty statute. I went, Bill, he couldn't be more innocent. And after talking to Bill, Bill's now a big champion of getting Tafaris freed, and ultimately he will be.
Well, thank you for that information. And there's a lot of information out there about this case, including on a podcast called Ear Witness. So definitely suggest checking it out. And for more of Richard's cases, do check out the book. I'm going to ask you two sort of closing questions, and then we'll come to a close. And one that I really want to ask you is, and I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. You know, we talked about, maybe discussing some of the lessons that you've learned. And I'm wondering if you could tie that into how your Judaism impacts your practice.
One of the things about being Jewish, I have always been proud to be Jewish. I wear that Judaism all over me. There's if you listen to any of those podcasts, Ear Witness and the Rudolph podcast, which David I think has listened to. Some of you have. I haven't listened to it. I've listened to a couple, but I know I'm all through it. But Judaism is the corner of who I am as a person. Judaism is essential to my core identity. I believe that we're fortunate to have been born Jewish. We have values that I think set us apart from most others. Not that other people don't have great values, but I think when you take a look at our values and our commitment to caring about other people and our commitment to worship God and believe in a higher power, Judaism is where it's at. And even though my spiritual journey is not only Judaism, Judaism is at my core of who I am. I'm proud to be Jewish, and I believe that the values of family matter because we take family seriously. And even though my personal history doesn't reflect that, I'm aware of how important family is to Judaism and how important family is to our children and to our identity and to our society.
And I will, now this is a bonus third question, but I will say right before we started this interview, you shared that you were excited to have this as something you could share with your daughter. Is there anything you would sort of add as a message to your daughter, I think grandchildren too, in this interview?
You got an hour?
I was thinking like a minute.
Well, we're all proud of our children. My daughter, as you know, went to the day school and was reading books cover to cover in Hebrew at 4. And my daughter is truly a Hebrew scholar and a Spanish scholar. And the day that she got in Harvard was a huge day for me, and that her getting her PhD there, and then still teaches at Harvard, and has taken everything that she'd learned from the Jewish day school and is now a teacher at a Jewish day school in Boston and is Chabad. I was just there 3 weeks ago, and I'm proud of her. I'm proud of my grandchildren, and I'm hoping that one day she'll have a chance to know how proud I am of her. If she doesn't, I believe she does know.
Well, now we'll have this to share with her too.
Thank you.
And
thanks for the great interview.
Well, wait, I've got one more question.
Oh.
Hold on, I'm the one who gets to end it.
Yeah, sure.
My last question, I just thought this was really lovely because you emailed me some different notes and things. At some point we were going back and forth, and you listed some of your hobbies. And most of them were like yoga, writing, things we might think of as hobbies. But one of them that you put there was modeling kindness. And I thought that was just a really nice thing to list as a hobby. And I thought maybe we could end on you just sharing a little bit of what that means to you.
Well, you know, the Jewish Bible says that, the Torah says that, and I believe it's in the First Testament, the New Testament too, that says if you do something kind for somebody, you're not supposed to tell anyone. But I'm going to violate that and say that I was at Walgreens 2 hours ago, and this African-American woman was having a problem getting her little stuff she was getting, and so I just asked the person to let me pay for it. I don't say that because I'm a good person or I'm better than anyone else, but I'm saying that little bit of money meant nothing to me, but it meant a lot to her. You know, she choked up and started crying, and it was a nice, you know, it made me feel good to do that. And I think that even to be a hard-nosed criminal defense lawyer, I'm a person first and a lawyer second. And most of my colleagues, even those that I've faced and had adversarial relationships with, would probably agree with that.
Well, I think that's the perfect note to end on. So I will now conclude our interview, and we can all give a round of applause and thank you to Richard. And the next date is, I believe, November 12th, if that is a Wednesday. And if not, it is the Wednesday around that date. But it will be with Florina Newcomb, our newly installed CEO of the Birmingham Jewish Federation. She has a really interesting story about coming over from Moldova as a young child and working in the Jewish community forever. So come and listen then. We're skipping October because of the holidays. So everybody have a happy new year.